Most people know the famous guns of the frontier, but the Old West carried far stranger firepower. These were weapons hidden in coats, saddlebags, and desk drawers that history quietly buried. Across the West, hundreds of odd firearms circulated in small numbers. Some were short-run experiments, some were imported designs, and some were converted war leftovers. Many were pocket weapons built for one desperate moment. Some were experimental, others risky, and many were decades ahead of anything the frontier expected. Most disappeared long before the legends were written, but each of them reveals how people actually armed themselves on the edge of America. Today, we are uncovering 20 forgotten Wild West weapons you almost never hear about, from 28-round repeaters to disguised cane guns and mechanical ideas that vanished as fast as they appeared. The frontier was not just Colts and Winchesters. It was a world of strange, brilliant, short-lived weapons that few people remember today. Now, let's start with one of the most unusual and overlooked weapons ever carried on the frontier. Number 20. The Belgian harmonica rifle, the sliding chamber experiment. Few frontier weapons looked more unconventional than the Belgian harmonica rifle. Developed in Belgium and France in the 1830s and 1840s, it used a sliding metal bar drilled with multiple chambers. After each shot, the shooter pushed the bar sideways by hand to line up the next loaded chamber with the barrel. It was an early attempt at a repeating rifle before reliable lever actions existed, and a few settlers brought them west because they were far cheaper than American-made guns. But the design had serious flaws. Dust or grit could jam the sliding block, misalignment could shave lead or cause misfires, and the exposed chambers made the system risky if the bar was bumped. On the frontier, where reliability meant survival, those weaknesses were enough to retire it quickly. Its unusual design marked a brief moment when inventors were experimenting wildly in the hunt for true, repeating firepower. Number 19. The Sharps and Hankins carbine, the leather-wrapped carbine. The Sharps and Hankins carbine stood out immediately thanks to one feature no other frontier rifle carried: a leather-wrapped barrel. Built in the 1860s, its most unusual feature was the tight leather covering around the barrel. This wasn't decoration, it was protection. The carbine was designed for naval service, and the leather wrap kept saltwater, rain, and grit from damaging the barrel or jamming the action. After the Civil War, surplus examples filtered west through government auctions, picked up by scouts, settlers, and former sailors who wanted a cheap, reliable long gun. Mechanically, it used a simple falling block action and fired a .52 caliber rimfire cartridge. Slow but dependable. The leather wrap had a surprising advantage on the frontier. It didn't freeze to bare hands in winter or burn the skin after firing, something men appreciated long before heat shields existed. Still, the carbine was heavy, replacement parts were scarce, and the ammunition was already becoming outdated. As better rifles spread west, the Sharps and Hankins quietly faded from use. Its story reflects how leftover military gear shaped everyday survival long after the war had ended. Number 18. The Duckfoot pistol, the frontier crowd control gun. The Duckfoot pistol took a simple idea and turned it into one of the widest firing handguns of its era. Instead of a single barrel, it fired 3 or 4 at once, each angled outward like a fan. It wasn't meant for duels or quick draws. It was built for one terrifying moment when several people had to be stopped at close range. Originally favored by sailors and private guards in the 1700s and early 1800s, a small number made their way into the American West through traders and riverboat crews. In cramped saloon rooms or narrow cabin corridors, the Duckfoot delivered exactly what its owners wanted: shock, smoke, and enough lead to scatter a crowd. Mechanically, it was simple but crude. Most were flintlock or percussion designs, slow to reload, heavy at the muzzle, and inaccurate beyond a few steps. But when all barrels fired together, the effect was immediate. Its limitations held it back. The recoil was brutal, The spread wasted power, and by the time revolvers became affordable, the duckfoot was already obsolete. Its place in history reflects the chaotic, close-quarters realities of frontier violence. Number 17. The Slocum Side-Loading Revolver, the pocket gun with sliding chambers. The Slocum side-loading revolver tackled a problem most pocket guns couldn't solve: how to reload without touching Colt's patents. Instead of loading cartridges through a gate or removing the cylinder, each chamber had its own sliding brass sleeve. To reload, the shooter pushed a sleeve forward, dropped in a round, then slid it back into place. It was slow but far easier than removing the entire cylinder in the middle of a fight. The revolver was designed in the late 1860s to work around Colt's powerful reload patents, which locked most competitors out of traditional loading systems. By avoiding the patent and creating a completely different mechanism, Slocum produced a small revolver that could be legally sold without fear of a lawsuit. Mechanically, it fired 32 rimfire, a modest cartridge, and was meant for close-range defense. Many examples found their way west with travelers, gamblers, and shopkeepers who wanted something small and affordable. Its weaknesses were obvious. The sliding sleeves collected dust, the mechanism could loosen, and the short barrel limited accuracy. When true swing-out and gate-loading revolvers became cheap, the Slocum design vanished almost overnight. Its legacy shows how often 19th-century gunmaking was shaped as much by patent battles as by practical design. Some of the strangest designs are still ahead, including a few most people have never even heard existed. Number 16. The Colt Cloverleaf Revolver, the 4-shot pocket oddity. The Colt Cloverleaf was one of the rarest pocket pistols Colt ever produced, instantly recognizable by its 4-shot clover cylinder. Introduced in the early 1870s, it used a 4-shot cylinder shaped like a clover leaf, giving the revolver its name. Designed as a small, concealable firearm, it was meant for travelers, gamblers, and anyone who wanted a compact defensive weapon without the bulk of a full-size Colt. Mechanically, it fired 41 rimfire and used a clever ejector rod system housed directly inside the cylinder's central axis. For a small revolver, it was surprisingly well made, and many frontier shopkeepers and stage passengers carried them because they were reliable, easy to operate, and quick to draw from a coat pocket. But the design also had limits. 4 shots wasn't much in an era when 6-shot revolvers were rapidly becoming standard, and the unusual cylinder shape made the gun slightly harder to manufacture. As cartridge technology improved, more powerful and higher capacity pocket revolvers quickly overshadowed it. The Cloverleaf remained in production for only a few short years before vanishing from Colt's catalog. Today, it survives as a forgotten oddity, a small, clever experiment from a company better known for guns twice its size. Number 15. The Colt Thuer Conversion, the revolver that backed into the future. The Colt Thuer Conversion was among the most ambitious transitional revolvers of the post-Civil War years. Before Colt had the rights to use metallic cartridges, engineers designed a system that allowed older percussion revolvers to fire a new, tapered cartridge loaded from the front of the cylinder. It was an unusual attempt to update Civil War-era cap and ball pistols without completely rebuilding them. Introduced in the late 1860s, the Thuer system worked by machining the cylinder chambers into a funnel shape. Shooters inserted a special cartridge nose first into each chamber, and the revolver's loading gate rotated into place to act as a rudimentary extractor. It was complex, slightly delicate, and required ammunition that only Colt produced, but it gave owners of older revolvers a way to modernize without buying a brand new firearm. A number of these conversions made their way west with veterans, travelers, and settlers who still carried their wartime sidearms. For men who couldn't afford a brand new metallic cartridge Colt, the Thuer offered a temporary solution during a fast-moving period of gun development. Its downfall was simple. The system was expensive, the cartridges were costly, and newer designs like the 1871 to 72 open top quickly surpassed it. Within a few years, the Thur conversion disappeared from common use. Today, it stands as a forgotten bridge between two eras, a clever but short-lived attempt to drag an old style of revolver into the modern age. Number 14. The Porter Turret Rifle, the circular chamber gamble. Few experimental rifles of the 19th century carried more promise, or more risk, than the Porter Turret Rifle. Instead of a traditional cylinder or magazine, it used a rotating turret shaped like a drum, with multiple chambers arranged in a circular pattern. As the shooter worked the action, the turret indexed to bring each chamber in line with the barrel. On paper, it promised fast repeat shots long before lever actions dominated the West. But in practice, the design had a serious flaw. The open chamber mouths faced outward, meaning a spark or blast from one charge could ignite the others. This risk of a chain detonation made the rifle notoriously unsafe, especially around black powder. A few examples still reached the frontier in the 1850s and early 1860s, usually carried by inventors, tinkerers, or settlers fascinated by new technology. The Porter's firing rate was impressive for its time, but the danger outweighed the benefits. Accuracy suffered from the bulky turret, and the risk of multiple chambers exploding at once turned potential buyers away. As more reliable repeating rifles emerged, the Porter turret rifle vanished almost as quickly as it appeared. Today, it stands as one of the strangest experiments in firearms history. A bold idea that pushed the limits of innovation, but asked its users to gamble with every shot. Number 13. The Perry Carbine, the needle-fire trail gun. The Perry Carbine represents one of the boldest needle-fire experiments to reach the frontier during a rapidly changing era of gun design. Built in the 1850s and early 1860s, it used a needle-fire ignition system rather than a traditional percussion cap. When the trigger was pulled, a long firing needle pierced the base of a paper cartridge to ignite the powder inside. At a time when metallic cartridges were still emerging, this design was considered advanced and unusually fast to load. The carbine was light, compact, and simple to operate, making it appealing to scouts, survey teams, and mounted messengers who needed something more manageable than a full-length musket. A small number were carried west by former military contractors and civilians who picked them up during the chaotic period of firearms experimentation between major wars. But the system had serious drawbacks. The firing needle was thin and prone to breaking, especially in cold weather or under heavy use. And because the rounds were made of paper, humidity could ruin an entire day's ammunition. Once metallic cartridges became widely available, the Perry design had no chance of competing. Most examples disappeared quietly as surplus, traded away or stored in trunks when better rifles reached the frontier. Today, the Perry Carbine survives as a forgotten relic of the brief era when inventors were racing to modernize firearms, each design one step closer to the cartridge rifles that would define the West. Number 12. The Joslin Carbine, the forgotten breech loader. The Joslin Carbine was among the earliest breech-loading rifles to gain real traction in the United States. Designed in the late 1850s, the Joslin used a simple pivoting breech block that flipped upward to expose the chamber. Compared to muzzle loaders, it was dramatically faster and far safer to reload on horseback or behind cover. Thousands were issued during the Civil War, and many of those surplus rifles found new life on the frontier during the 1860s and 1870s. Scouts, ranch hands, and settlers appreciated its straightforward design, and the .52 caliber rimfire cartridge delivered enough power for defense without the heavy recoil of larger rifles. But the carbine had limitations. The breech block could loosen over time, causing gas leakage, and early versions were sensitive to dirt and black powder fouling. As newer metallic cartridge rifles like the Springfield and Winchester series became common, the Joslin's older system quickly fell out of favor. By the 1880s, most Joslins had been traded, stored, or worn out, leaving only scattered examples across the West. Today, it stands as a forgotten stepping stone, a practical frontier rifle caught between the age of single-shot muskets and the era of true repeating firearms. Number 11. The Burgess Folding Shotgun. The shotgun that packed itself. Few compact frontier weapons were as practical, or as overlooked, as the Burgess Folding Shotgun. Designed in the 1890s by Andrew Burgess, a prolific firearms inventor, it featured a unique sliding mechanism that allowed the entire shotgun to fold nearly in half. In just a few seconds, a full-length 12-gauge became compact enough to hide under a coat or store in a saddlebag. Lawmen, Wells Fargo guards, and express messengers valued the design because it offered the power of a shotgun without the bulk. For men who needed a close-range fight stopper that remained out of sight until the moment it was needed, the Burgess was ideal. It could be carried discreetly on horseback or inside coaches where space was limited. Mechanically, the shotgun used a strong, simple locking system, but its folding action required precise machining. That made it more expensive than standard pump guns and far more complex to manufacture at scale. As cheaper repeating shotguns entered the market, the Burgess design struggled to compete. Production ended after only a few years, leaving the folding shotgun as a rare and unusual tool of the frontier's late era. Today, it stands as a forgotten marvel of compact firepower, a weapon built for men who needed big power in the smallest space possible. With these early entries behind us, the list now moves into the weapons that truly reshaped frontier firepower. Number 10. The Merwin-Hulbert Revolver, the frontier's precision mystery gun. The Merwin-Hulbert revolver may have been the most precisely engineered handgun many frontier shooters ever carried. Produced from the 1870s through the early 1900s, it used a unique twist and pull extraction system. When the shooter rotated the barrel and pulled it forward, only the empty cases ejected, while the loaded rounds stayed in place. No other revolver of the era worked quite like it. Frontier lawmen, detectives, and experienced shooters valued the Merwin for its exceptional machining and smooth action. Many users claimed it was better built than Colts or Smith & Wessons of the time, and the revolver became known for its tight lockup and reliable accuracy. Some even came with folding hammers or interchangeable barrels, offering features far ahead of their competitors. But the Merwin Company struggled financially. Patent disputes, production costs, and a devastating warehouse fire crippled the business. Without the marketing power of Colt or the manufacturing muscle of Smith & Wesson, the company faded, and the revolver disappeared with it. Today, surviving examples are rare, and their complex design fascinates collectors and historians alike. The Merwin-Hulbert remains one of the finest forgotten revolvers ever carried on the frontier, a precision masterpiece overshadowed by bigger names. Number 9. The Evans Repeating Rifle, the frontier's 34-shot sleeper. The Evans repeating rifle offered more firepower than almost anything else on the frontier, yet most people today have never heard of it. Built in Maine during the 1870s, it used a helical magazine inside the stock that held anywhere from 24 to 34 cartridges. Each pull of the lever rotated the internal spiral, feeding the next round forward in a smooth, continuous cycle. On paper, this gave the Evans a level of sustained fire no Winchester or Spencer could match. Some settlers, buffalo hunters, and militia units carried them west because they wanted volume over everything else. For men who feared being outnumbered on the trail, a rifle with 30 rounds ready to go was a powerful reassurance. But the system had fragile points. The internal magazine was difficult to repair, the ammunition was unique to the Evans design, and the rifle became unreliable when the spiral channel collected dust or grit. When the company folded in the late 1870s, ammunition supplies dried up almost immediately, leaving owners with rifles that were difficult to feed and harder to maintain. Despite its limitations, the Evans remains one of the boldest attempts to solve frontier firepower in a single design, a high-capacity experiment that arrived a decade before the West was ready for it. Number 8. The Remington Zigzag Derringer, the pocket revolver with tracks. The Remington Zigzag Derringer is one of the most ingenious pocket weapons ever produced in the 19th century. Its cylinder didn't rotate from a pawl or ratchet the way most revolvers did. Instead, each chamber locked into a carved zigzag track around the outside. When the hammer was cocked, a stud followed those grooves, indexing the cylinder with a surprisingly smooth and positive motion. This unusual system came from a period when manufacturers were experimenting with every possible way to avoid stepping on Colt's revolver patents. The zigzag design let Remington build a compact, concealable pistol that didn't rely on any protected mechanisms. It fired .22 rimfire, but its reliability and tiny size made it appealing to gamblers, travelers, and shopkeepers who wanted something close at hand without advertising it. Its weaknesses were what you'd expect in a gun this small. The short barrel offered minimal stopping power, and the external grooves could gather lint or pocket grit if the gun wasn't kept clean. But inside its intended range, a few feet, the zigzag performed exactly as designed. Production remained limited, partly because the mechanism was expensive to machine and partly because more conventional pocket revolvers soon became cheaper. As a result, the gun slipped out of the mainstream quickly. It stands today as one of the era's most inventive mechanical detours, proof that frontier gun-making sometimes took the strangest path between two ideas. Number 7. The Star Double-Action Revolver, the frontier's early speed shooter. The Star Double-Action Revolver was one of the earliest attempts to give frontier shooters faster follow-up shots. Introduced just before the Civil War, it offered a double-action trigger at a time when nearly every revolver on the market required the hammer to be cocked by hand for each shot. In skilled hands, the Star could fire more quickly than most Colts or Remingtons of its era. Its service during the Civil War put thousands of Star revolvers into circulation, and many of those made their way west in the hands of veterans, scouts, and settlers who already trusted the design. The gun's heavy, solid frame and smooth trigger pull made it reliable enough for daily carry, and its .44 caliber percussion load delivered respectable stopping power. But the mechanism had quirks. The double-action trigger was long and stiff, and the internal parts required more careful fitting than competing revolvers. When metallic cartridges became the standard, Star's percussion-based design fell behind quickly. A cartridge version was introduced, but by then, Colt and Smith & Wesson had already dominated the market. As a result, the Star faded from frontier life despite being years ahead of its time. Today, it's recognized as an early milestone in the race for faster shooting, a reminder that some frontier innovations arrived long before anyone knew how much they mattered. Number 6. The Smith & Wesson Safety Revolver, the grip-safe pocket protector. The Smith & Wesson Safety Revolver introduced an idea the frontier rarely saw: a pocket gun that couldn't fire unless the shooter meant it. Built in the 1880s, it used a grip safety built into the backstrap, a feature decades ahead of the better-known 1911 pistol. If the shooter didn't squeeze the grip fully, the internal mechanism locked the hammer and prevented the gun from discharging. This made the safety revolver unusually attractive to travelers, shopkeepers, and townspeople who wanted concealed protection without the risk of accidental firing in a pocket or purse. The gun used a top-brake design that ejected all spent cases at once, letting the user reload far faster than many comparable revolvers of the day. Despite these advantages, the design had drawbacks. The small calibers limited stopping power, and the grip safety could clog with grit if the gun wasn't kept clean. Frontier lawmen generally preferred more powerful sidearms, and the safety revolver remained a civilian favorite rather than a badge carrier's weapon. Over time, it was eclipsed by larger, stronger designs, but its engineering influence lived on. It remains one of the clearest signs that frontier gun makers were already thinking about safety long before the idea became standard. The final few designs are in a category of their own, representing the rarest and most unusual experiments of the century. Number 5. The volcanic pistol, the pistol that created a legend. The volcanic pistol marked a turning point in firearms experimentation during the 1850s, even if few frontier shooters ever carried one. Introduced in the 1850s, it used a lever-action mechanism built into a handgun frame, feeding self-contained rocket ball cartridges from a tubular magazine under the barrel. Each pull of the lever extracted a round, loaded the next one, and cocked the hammer, a revolutionary idea long before the first Winchester ever appeared. Despite its weak ammunition, the design attracted a group of investors whose names became giants: Oliver Winchester, Horace Smith, and Daniel Wesson. Their involvement pushed the system forward, and while the rocket ball rounds lacked real stopping power, the underlying mechanism became the foundation of the Henry rifle and later the Winchester 1866, the rifle that would define the American West. A few volcanic pistols did make it west, usually with gamblers, engineers, or men who were simply fascinated by cutting-edge technology. They were accurate enough for close range, beautifully made, and offered repeating fire at a time when most pistols were still single-shot or percussion revolvers. But the rocket ball ammunition limited their real-world usefulness, and the design struggled outside ideal conditions. Once true metallic cartridges emerged, the volcanic system was quickly overshadowed. Even so, its mechanical legacy is undeniable. The pistol's lever-action heart became the backbone of the rifles that shaped frontier history. Proof that one experimental sidearm can change the future, even if it never dominated the present. Number 4. The Burnside Carbine, the rifle with the cone-shaped cartridge. The Burnside carbine became one of the most widely issued cavalry rifles of the Civil War, yet few people today remember the unusual way it worked. Designed by Ambrose Burnside before he became a Union general, the rifle used a distinctive cone-shaped brass cartridge with an opening at the tip. When the breech locked shut, the pointed end sealed against the chamber, creating a remarkably tight gas seal for a black powder weapon. That efficient seal gave the Burnside better velocity and less gas blowback than many of its competitors. After the war, thousands of surplus rifles flowed west, carried by settlers, scouts, and former soldiers who already knew the carbine's strengths. Light, rugged, and easy to load on horseback, it became a practical choice for men traveling long distances or facing unpredictable threats. The system had weaknesses. Burnside cartridges were unique and sometimes hard to find in remote areas, and the breech lock could stiffen if fouled with powder residue. As metallic cartridge carbines like the Spencer and the Springfield trapdoor became widespread, the Burnside gradually fell behind. Even so, it played a major role in the early frontier years. Its unusual cartridge and solid design make it one of the most distinctive transition-era rifles, a weapon that bridged the gap between percussion firearms and the metallic cartridges that would soon dominate the West. Number 3. The Springfield Trapdoor Carbine, the hinged barrel workhorse. The Springfield Trapdoor Carbine stood at the center of frontier life after the Civil War, yet few people recall the unusual way it functioned. Introduced in 1873, it used a hinged breech block, the trapdoor, that flipped upward to expose the chamber. This allowed a cavalryman to reload a single metallic cartridge far faster than any muzzle loader and with much less effort on horseback. Chambered in .45-70 government, the carbine delivered serious power in a compact package. Scouts, cavalry units, buffalo hunters, and settlers relied on it for everything from long-distance travel to open-range defense. Its accuracy and rugged construction made it a trusted companion across thousands of miles of frontier country. But the design wasn't perfect. The trap door could be stiff when fouled with black powder residue, and the lighter carbine load produced noticeable recoil. Ammunition shortages in remote regions also pushed some users back toward older rifles or whatever they could keep fed. Even so, the trapdoor carbine shaped frontier history more than most people realize. Its simple, reliable action carried soldiers across the Great Plains and helped bridge the gap between traditional single-shot rifles and the repeating firearms that would soon dominate the West. Number 2, the Spencer Repeating Carbine, the 7-shot game changer. The Spencer Repeating Carbine changed frontier firepower overnight. Introduced during the Civil War, it used a tubular magazine built into the buttstock, feeding 7 metallic rimfire cartridges with a smooth lever action. For soldiers and settlers used to single-shot rifles, the ability to fire 7 rounds before reloading was nothing short of revolutionary. On the frontier, the Spencer became the rifle of men who expected trouble: scouts, cavalry veterans, buffalo hunters, and settlers traveling through dangerous country. Its rugged action, reliable extraction, and quick reloads gave ordinary shooters a level of sustained fire that had been unthinkable only a decade earlier. And with the Blakesley quick loader, a practiced user could recharge the magazine in seconds by dumping fresh cartridges straight into the stock tube. But its strengths came with challenges. The 56-56 and later 56-50 rimfire cartridges were powerful but expensive, and finding ammunition in remote areas could be difficult. The magazine tube was also vulnerable to grit and dust, and the rifle's weight made it less appealing for men who traveled long distances on foot. As newer center-fire repeaters emerged, the Spencer was gradually outpaced. Yet for a brief moment in frontier history, nothing matched it. The Spencer offered unmatched firepower, reliability, and confidence to the men who carried it, a rifle that truly reshaped what a lone traveler could survive. Number 1. The Hotchkiss Revolving Cannon, the Frontier's 5-barrel Thunderbolt. The Hotchkiss revolving cannon is one of the most extraordinary forgotten weapons ever to appear on the American frontier. Designed in the late 1870s, it used a massive rotating drum with 5 rifled barrels, each fired by turning a hand crank. Every rotation loaded, fired, and extracted a round with mechanical precision, creating a sustained burst of firepower unmatched by anything short of a Gatling gun. Although rare, Hotchkiss cannons were shipped to a handful of western forts, remote outposts, and army detachments tasked with defending long stretches of frontier territory. They offered rapid, accurate fire at distances where repeating rifles struggled, and their shells could punch through adobe walls, wooden barricades, or charging horsemen with devastating effect. For small units guarding isolated posts, the cannon's reach and reliability made it a force multiplier far beyond its size. The design was rugged and simple to maintain, but it had limits. Ammunition was heavy, the gun required a trained crew to run efficiently, and it was far too costly for civilian use. Only the military or wealthy mining concerns ever fielded one, and even then, in tiny numbers. As newer rapid-fire weapons appeared, the Hotchkiss quietly faded from service. Yet its presence on the frontier, though rare, left a powerful impression. The idea that a rotating, hand-cranked cannon, part revolver, part artillery piece, once guarded lonely outposts, stands as one of the strangest and most impressive pieces of artillery ever stationed on the frontier. The frontier wasn't built on legends alone. It was shaped by strange ideas, bold experiments, and weapons that never earned a place in the spotlight. Each design on this list, no matter how rare or short-lived, shows how inventive the 19th century truly was. Some designs caught on, others vanished instantly, but all of them pushed firearm technology further than most people realize. If you've enjoyed uncovering the forgotten side of the West, there's a lot more history just like it waiting for you. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.